Hello, everyone. We've got a lot to catch up on. This is the Russ Matthews Show. A couple days ago, the brand new Prime Minister of Canada removed the carbon tax, the tax that just a few months ago many people would say was hugely important for the important existential fight against climate change. And angry people on Twitter are making a very big deal about this, using it as some sort of a hypocritical gotcha moment. But I think that this misses the point altogether. And in reality, there's a far more important thing to look at, a far more important opportunity here. And meanwhile, we've got tariff tension building. It seems like it has been going on forever at this point, ratcheting up. We've got Trump and Elon and Doge. They're putting some Canadians between a rock and a hard place. Because even if you are for reducing the size of government, there's something really wrong going on here, and it's a big problem for Canada. We're going to get into all of this today, and thanks for tuning in, by the way, whether you're listening on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music, Amazon Music. You can find all of those links in the description of this video. Review the show. Let me know what you think about everything we're talking about today. The big news, a new prime minister, yes, and the sort of first piece of policy that he's put into place is the removal of the signature policy. Let me turn my keyboard on so I can even do anything here. A signature policy, because I want to show you the very first thing that he did was remove the carbon tax, the signature policy of the Liberals over the past number of years. It's certainly the one that's gotten the most attention. Here's a tweet from the Liberal Party of Canada saying Mark Carney got it done. In big text, Mark Carney canceled the carbon tax. Axed the tax, if you will, if you want to put it in slogan terms. So this obviously has made people's minds break a little bit. To talk about the carbon tax in general first, and if you've listened to the channel, you'll know that in my mind, rather unpopular from a lot of the people that listen, I've always thought that the whole carbon tax controversy was very largely overblown. Both sides, both the Liberals and the Conservatives, were constantly citing the exact same study, the exact same observations from the Parliamentary Budget Officer. If you haven't heard this spiel before, I think you'll find it interesting. There was one report that both sides were pointing at to say that the other side was wrong. They were using the same source material here. The gist of it was that the Liberals were using this source material to say, hey, everybody gets more back, except unless you're really rich, everybody gets more back in rebates than they see in increased costs for this carbon tax. So actually Canadians end up better off at the end of the day. That's what the Liberals would point to. And yes, it did say that in the study. Now, simultaneously, the Conservatives would look at this report too, but they'd look at a different table. The Liberals chose to look at one table or one chart in it, and the Conservatives chose to look at another. And this second one, the ones that the Conservatives would cite, would be the one that says, hey, while it may be true that people get more money back when you look at it just on the cost side of things, when you interpret this and when you consider all of the added costs that happen as a result of the carbon tax, the costs of shipping things and all these sort of external goods that can't be calculated as easily on the price of a single item, well, when you consider that, well, Canadians end up in not as good of a place than if the tax didn't exist. So these are the two sides of it. Now, I always thought that it wasn't that big of a deal because of the rebate. The cost was marginal. Now, that's going to upset a number of people who have always sort of said that this carbon tax was the end of the world in terms of cost. I think there's a lot bigger problems contributing to the cost of everyday goods in Canada. But there's an important lesson here for the Conservatives, one that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. You need to realize that people have an incredibly short memory, or at the very least aren't hyper-fixated on some of these nuances. They likely don't know much about this report and who's pointing at what and why it's better or why it's worse. In their minds now, the carbon tax is a non-issue when it comes to debating, whether Conservatives like it or not. And this got you of the removal, right? This hypocritical idea that, okay, well, a minute ago, the Liberals were saying, well, this is a very, very important policy. But now, a couple months later, they're saying that, okay, we can cancel it. Well, doesn't that mean that they never believed in it in the first place? That gotcha doesn't really work. We've seen explanations from the Liberals saying that it's not that they don't believe in this policy. They say you can believe it or not. it's not that they don't believe in this policy anymore. It's that it's the fault of the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre for making it such a divisive issue, for making it so that Canadians didn't understand how it truly worked. This is the framing that they're giving right now. So this hypocritical gotcha stuff that you might be seeing on your social feeds, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. It is a little bit hypocritical. It is a little bit funny, right? Because you think if you're the prime minister and with this explanation that he's now given, isn't it part of your job to do the unpopular things that you personally believe will lead the country in the right direction? And that seems to be the position of Carney and the Liberal government now. But because there's an election coming up, clearly not going to keep putting the foot on the gas pedal of this carbon tax. But there's been tons of outrage, right? Outrage about why the Liberals are doing this and when they're doing it, and if Carney is stealing Pierre Poilievre's policies from the Conservatives. You've heard people saying this. Well, he's just taking all the things that he's been saying. I don't think that you should be focused on that. Instead, perhaps focus on how the carbon tax, outside of the cost that any Canadian would pay for it, the policy in and of itself didn't work. I think that is the key focus here, or should be the key focus, that, hey, even when you spent this money to, or even when you use the carbon tax to provide disincentives for people to spend money on things that aren't as green as you'd like them to be, even when you were implementing this policy, we still didn't meet any of the targets that you yourself set in terms of climate progress. The policy was unsuccessful. We haven't gotten in the past 10 years anywhere close to where we said we were going to get on the climate issue. Now, if this is a very big issue for you, some people say, okay, climate change isn't that big of a deal. It's not an existential worry. Other people will think very differently about that. But regardless of which way you land on it, I think you can point to this and say, if your goal was to reduce emissions to the extent that you said you wanted to, well, this policy is a failure. It didn't work. That's not even considering the costs borne by average Canadians to implement this policy, and to the extent of which that is significant. The policy didn't work. I think that should be the point here. So if that policy didn't work, maybe there's two different ways that you can go with it. We've seen some of the even more progressive people in the country, people who are saying, we didn't go far enough here. We need to be more extreme. And if we were more extreme on this carbon tax policy, well, then maybe we would have hit our emissions targets. So if we ratcheted it up by 10 times, maybe we would have hit those goals, but at what cost? I don't think that you'd find many people that think that would be a popular policy to just turn up the dial to 11 here. So if that isn't going to be a popular policy path, then maybe there's a less extreme policy path, maybe one that focuses on technology and using our energy resources to fund more research and into alternative energies, the expansion of nuclear. These kinds of things, I think, are what we should be talking about, because clearly turning up the dial to 11, multiplying the carbon tax by 10, which maybe would be the only way we'd hit those climate goals that were made by the government and all these international accords on climate. If that is the goal, clearly we're not getting to it, and clearly there needs to be a total shifting in the way that we think about it. Not even certain that this industrial carbon tax that now is being talked about is going to make a dent if you truly do think that this is very important to hit these targets. So it just doesn't square for anybody, and people aren't talking about it like that. We don't see it being pointed out, and it's a missed opportunity for the Conservative government as we sit here today. And that is really what I want to talk a lot about today, actually. It connects to this trend that I'm seeing. And if Pierre Poilievre is your guy, if this is the person that you're 100% committed to, then this trend that I'm seeing is going to be pretty worrying for you. Because when I look at the strategy that the parties are taking and choosing to go with leading into this expected upcoming election, and if I look at this from a totally detached observer standpoint, well, right now the Liberals are crushing it. Whether this strategy impresses you or not, it's working. It's working. The Liberals have been implementing a political strategy that has seen them come from the lowest of the lows in a very short period of time, if you believe the polling. It's hard to say that we shouldn't look at that when there's multiple different polls showing this direction. Whether you think it's on the extreme end of it or the not so extreme end of it, everybody knows which way the direction is going right now, right? The Conservatives have lost their clear majority, and the Liberals now look to be neck and neck. So the Liberal political strategy is working. And what is the cornerstone? What is the keystone of that strategy right now? It's saying Pierre Poilievre equals Trump. Oh my gosh, I can't even say his name. Poilievre equals Trump. You say it enough, some people are going to believe it. Now, I think that some things are similar and some aren't, but it is, you can't deny it's a good strategy. If you look purely at what Trump has done in respect to Canada, not about the rest of the things that have happened since he came into office, it's hard to say that a lot of it makes sense when you're looking at it purely from a Canadian perspective in the interests of Canada, right? Like, I can make a rational explanation for a lot of the economic policy going on. This idea of tariffs being an important tool so that you can bring back manufacturing into your country, with the thesis that, hey, the American people lost out on this middle class because we chose to outsource all of our manufacturing, all of these jobs that used to be in the States. We outsourced it to China and to other Asian countries, and we got cheaper goods as a result of it. But at what cost? How much of the wealth created in the country is isolated in the top percentages, whereas before maybe there was more wealth accumulated as a result of having manufacturing in the States. So perhaps tariffs are a way that you can do that. It's going to be painful for America, but maybe it's worth it in the long run. Nobody knows for certain. We're going to have to wait and see. That's my rational explanation for it. But we don't hear that in Canada. We don't hear that even succinctly said by anyone in Trump's administration. So it's hard to imagine that that is the exact way that they're thinking about things. You see on the other side, the fentanyl reasoning, even that is kind of up in the air. Some days we hear that is the reason that everything's going on between the two countries. Some days we hear it's something else entirely. Now, on the fentanyl issue, I can see the argument of saying that it's not the drugs crossing the border. It's not that, but it's the financial crime and the laundering of money that funds these crime networks who, there's evidence, work with foreign states' governments. And hey, at this point, we can't be entirely certain that these crime organizations don't work with Canadian governments and Canadian officials at this point. Who knows? You can never know when it comes to national security issues like that. Everything's hidden from the public behind a guise of we can't tell you because it's in the interest of the country that we, the people who control the national security apparatus, don't tell you. That's the reason why. So you can't know. But even that point is not what you're hearing from the U.S. administration on fentanyl, which would be a reasonable thing to say, I think. That's not what they're saying. So this reasoning for why all this economic policy is being put into place from a purely Canadian perspective is so inconsistent and up in the air that it's hard to know what the current U.S. administration even really thinks. So this puts us in a challenging position in Canada, even for people who may have understood and supported Trump, some of his policies, maybe the foreign policy, the way that he's handling wars around the world, this geopolitical stuff. I think that this lack of clarity on the economic policy and tariffs makes it really hard to even know what the hell's going on, let alone be able to say that you support it, right? It's hard to get behind. It's hard to get behind. So for the Liberals, this Pierre equals Trump thing, this strategy, it's working, and you can kind of see why. Not that the two are very similar when you look at individual records and how things have gone down if you've been following it closely, but to a less informed population, which I think is most people in Canada, it kind of works. This is this guy who's kind of brash, kind of tells it how it is, that kind of thing. You can kind of sort of stick some stuff to Poilievre, get some sort of crossfire here going on between the battle between the Liberals and Trump, and get Poilievre hit in the middle of it, right? So that strategy makes sense, but then we look at the other side. We look at the Conservative strategy going into this next election. That makes a lot less sense to me. So much so, gets a paper pop. Popping my notes here. The Conservative strategy makes a lot less sense to me, and it seems a little desperate. If I'm being entirely honest, looking at this from just trying to look at it from a detached observer standpoint, it makes a lot less sense strategically. It seems desperate because it seems like they're saying, well, 6 months ago, we were doing so incredibly well. So let's cling to that world that existed 6 months ago, even 3 months ago, 4 months ago. Let's cling to that world. Let's act like we can get back there in the way that we got there in the first place. So doing things that were working then. Let's say Carney is Trudeau. Hey, maybe that would work. Everybody hated Trudeau. Lowest approval ratings I've seen. Maybe if we can say Carney is Trudeau, Carney is Trudeau, Carney is Trudeau, maybe that will work. Because we had the dirt on Trudeau. We had enough people not liking him. And let's also say they're going to bring back the carbon tax that they just canceled. Let's say that. Even though they just canceled it, they could bring back the carbon tax. Let's say Carney is Trudeau. Let's say the carbon tax is coming back. They're going to bring it back. And Carney probably is just like Trudeau, and they probably are going to bring back the carbon tax in some sort of way. Who knows? I wouldn't put it past them, certainly. But I don't think that that's going to work as a strategy. I think you need to instead focus on changes that you potential Poilievre government would put into place that could get broad support. Changes that inadvertently target Carney, his character, and some of the issues that you see with him. This isn't what's happening. This isn't what's happening. And I want to show you a clip because Pierre Poilievre congratulated Mark Carney, or just made statements rather about Mark Carney after he was sworn in. I want to show you this. It's not the best strategy in my mind. It's just not. Listen to this.
His headquarters out of Canada to New York, moving jobs away from Canada. Today, Liberals are trying to trick Canadians into electing them for a fourth term in power with a cabinet that is 87% the same as Trudeau's cabinet. 100% of today's Liberal cabinet were in Justin Trudeau's Liberal caucus. These same Liberal MPs voted to hike the carbon tax, double the debt, double food bank lineups, and double housing costs. The same Liberals all supported blocking pipelines, LNG plants, and passing the anti-energy law C-69 that has made Canada even more reliant on the U.S. Stephen Guilbeault, for example, the radical anti-development activist twice arrested for climbing buildings illegally to block resource projects, a self-described, and I quote, socialist, has been promoted to be the minister responsible for all of Quebec, but also responsible, according to Mr. Carney, for nature. That means nothing will get built anywhere in Canada because he will be standing in the way.
So this is the strategy, but you guys, it's not working. It's not working. You've seen the polls. You've been doing this while Mark Carney's been running. What? And if you think that most Canadians can name one single cabinet minister, I think you're grossly mistaken. Maybe just Freeland. Maybe most people would know Freeland if you polled the general public, people who don't follow politics. But pointing out the cabinet history of Stephen Guilbeault is only going to mean something to a small amount of people. So this Trudeau equals Carney thing, I don't think is going to land. People can see the faces, and they're different faces, so they are different guys, surface level. And even if we go as far as saying Carney and the elites that he serves he was the puppet master behind Trudeau all along, even if you wanted to say that. and say that he's 100% identical, except his socks are a little less interesting. There's less color. Maybe they're blue, gray, and brown now, instead of having watermelons and unicorns on them. You can say you can't just say that these guys are the same every single day and expect that people who haven't been watching this unfold all along are gonna just take your word for it, especially when we're living in this time of short clips. You got a new face saying something in Carney. It's gonna sound a little bit different to people. I think that you've got to pin Carney in a different way if you're the Conservatives. Pin Carney with your own fresh policy ideas that are hard for Canadians to say, no, we don't think that's a good idea. Clear, good ideas that also are very broad, but subtly are sort of subtweets at Carney in terms of the policies that you push. Talk about, okay, maybe you look at it from this standpoint. You say, we need a little bit of reform when it comes to members of parliament to make sure that there's less corruption. As such, we, the Conservatives, believe that you should have to disclose clearly all of the assets that you own if you are a member of parliament. You've got to tell us everything that you own, or you take it a step further, divest yourself or sell all of these assets that you own of anything, any equity or any interest that you might have in sectors that are regulated by the federal government. That this would be something that I think would be supported by a lot of Canadians, right? It makes sense that people shouldn't own stocks that they can stand to benefit from by the regulations and the policies that they're putting in place. So maybe you say, okay, politicians have to sell all their assets before before they're an MP into just after they're an MP. Okay. You'd have some pushback there. People would say, well, we can't force people to sell all of their assets. That's not fair. I say, why not? Is it so unbearable that these members of parliament sit with their cash from these investments that they've sold in a high interest savings account for 4 years? Maybe that would instead give them a better perspective on what most Canadians who live paycheck to paycheck or have limited savings are dealing with, sitting with their cash in a savings account. And if that's the case, and all of your assets had to be sold, or a majority of them had to be sold while you're a member of parliament, well, then maybe that would also incentivize you not to destroy the value of that currency that you're holding. If you don't have the way out because all your money is in real estate and all your money is in stocks, then you might think twice before you ask your central bank to go in there and print billions and billions of dollars, making it so that all of the assets that you don't hold now because of this policy go up in value while your cash devalues. Do you see where I'm going here? Maybe a policy like that. Maybe you wouldn't like to do that if you're Pierre because maybe you have significant assets yourself. I know his wife has a couple rental properties, but this is the way that you can pin Carney. And this is the type of policy that I'm talking about. Maybe you make the argument that we need MPs to. So here's a thought. You're going to hear people say, well, we can't do this because members of parliament need to make money so that we incentivize people to come in and be members of parliament. So we can't take away the ways that they can make money through investing. Otherwise, we won't have our best and brightest, the smartest and the best Canadians in power if we take away their ability to make money. Well, first of all, I'd say, are we really getting the best and brightest as it stands right now? I mean, come on. Let's be honest here. But by that logic, we should be increasing members of parliament's wages to get the best people. And if you start going down that road, I think you're going to have a hard time getting a lot of people behind you saying we need to increase the money that MPs make, right? So I don't see a reason why you couldn't say, okay, you got to sell all your assets. That would target Carney. Maybe you could make requirements that members of parliament spend at least 180 days in Canada for 4 years, both before and after they are members of parliament. You say, hey, that's not so hard. That's half the year, right? You got to spend that time in Canada for a number of years before you serve in office and a number of years after you serve in office. maybe everybody who's an MP should have to give up their foreign passports. Maybe they should have to say, you know what, if I'm going to govern in Canada and this is my home, maybe I should only be a Canadian citizen. Maybe I should only be a Canadian citizen. That's not the case for, like, I think 70 or 80 members of parliament. I can't remember the exact number. It's not the case. And people, I bring this up and people act like it's some kind of racist thing to say, and I don't get it. I'm talking about incentive alignment for our politicians. Align your incentives so that politicians will have to reap what they sow. Politicians will have to deal with the country that they create. Align politicians' incentives with the people that they are governing. This is what these policies ideas are doing. Now, this time spent in Canada thing for Carney, maybe that would be a little bit of an issue, right? Given the sort of international cohort that he finds himself in of international bankers and some of the wealthiest, right? Now, that some people say that gives him a good resume. Some people say otherwise. But these are the types of things that I think the Conservatives should consider looking at. This is what they should look at. But there is another brilliant Liberal strategy that has been employed here. And we talked about it on the show, maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. It's this brilliance of the Trudeau fall guy strategy, because that's what we've seen, right? It's a golden opportunity for the Liberals over the past month before Carney was just sworn in to say, okay, we can pin all of these policies that weren't popular on this guy that is going out. And we don't have to take responsibility for anything that happened before because of that. It gives us incredible freedom to do stuff and then have an excuse to say, well, actually, it was the last guy who did that. It was the last guy who did that. I won't do something like that. This is a very powerful position to be in. It gives you the ability to hand out contracts like the one I want to show you right here. If you're on YouTube, you can see this on your screen. If not, I'll read it for you. It's a contract here that was given out by the government of just under $6 million to a marketing company to convince Canadians that the carbon tax was a good policy. Now, this was handed out, I believe, in October. And now, only a number of months later, this policy has been canceled entirely. So instead, we see $6 million, just under $6 million. And I have a reason to believe that this contract was completed in a 3-month period. A 3-month period for $6 million paid to a media advertising agency to find ways to get the message across to Canadians that they're actually better off from this carbon tax and it's a good thing. Well, now we have Trudeau the fall guy. We can give out contracts like this, and the new guy, Carney, if he gets questioned about it, he can say, "Hey, I just got here. What are you looking at me for? What are you looking at me for? This $6 million goes to some global advertising agency. I probably know the CEO. Probably that money wasn't incredibly well spent, but it was the last guy who did it. It's a brilliant strategy, this Trudeau fall guy strategy. Now, you might be saying, well, there's something that you can focus on if you're the Conservatives. That's $6 million of wasteful spending. Wasteful spending. Why don't you focus on that if you're the Conservatives? But you can't. You cannot right now. You can't focus on the crazy ballooning costs of government or these contracts handed out or the vast amounts of money given to consultants in Canada because of the perception of DOGE in the U.S. That's the Department of Government Efficiency headed by Elon Musk and under control by Donald Trump in the States. We've got to talk about DOGE. If you've listened to me, you'll probably know that in general, I'm in favor of a reduction in government spending. I think more agency should be given to individuals. People should have more choice over where their money goes. I think that there's a lot of waste and abuse in the system. At the same time, I thank God that we do have taxes and we do spend money in Canada on certain things. Like, thank God you don't have to go bankrupt if you've got to get your appendix removed or something like that. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look for ways to improve our healthcare system, make it more efficient, It doesn't mean that we shouldn't reward private individual doctors and nurses so that more people can get family doctors without sitting on a waiting list for 12 years. On top of that, I think that the tax brackets should be lifted upwards. $100,000 isn't what it used to be. It would be pretty nice, but that honestly isn't what it used to be in a lot of places in Canada. And if you're really all about taxing the rich, let's make sure that those people are actually rich who you're taxing. Now, I think that you should reduce government so that you can afford to make these tax changes, prompt more risk-taking by people who are not already wealthy, because maybe they'll be able to keep more of their income. It'll help us go into debt less quickly if we can reduce government spending. These are all ideas that I think are not entirely unpopular. But today, if the Conservatives were to bring any of this up, because of the poor branding and the visuals, we live in a visual world. The visuals that are coming out of Doge in the U.S. and the narratives and the headlines, even if they aren't entirely accurate, but just the visuals, the optics of it all. Because of those visuals, the Conservatives can't talk about government waste and government spending in Canada because they would risk an even closer comparison to the U.S., who I think is directionally right on government spending, but the optics are wrong. And the Conservatives can't risk having this liberal strategy of Polyev equals Trump. They can't risk that ringing any more true than it already does for a lot of people. Warranted or not. But you know this if you've been listening to the channel, perception is absolutely everything. Elon, I think he's an incredibly smart guy, incredibly autistic guy, incredibly smart. He's made great products. Clearly he has a talent for management and getting things done. But he's, like, if we're being serious about it, he's not so likable these days, kind of cringy. Now, I don't think he's a Nazi. In fact, I think all of these Nazi and Hitler comparisons are pretty offensive. It's pretty offensive to say that these people are like Hitler, because when you point to anything questionable that somebody does and says those guys are Nazis, I think you're undermining and minimizing the horrors of what happened in World War II. So I personally get offended when I hear that talking point, the comparison all the time that this guy's a Nazi, that this person's a Nazi, when I think it minimizes what actually was done in those days. But even if Elon Musk and Trump are not Nazis, that doesn't mean that the way they're handling things is perfect or is great. I'll listen to the argument that maybe you need an engineering mind and extremely quick action, and quick action outside of the purview of sort of congressional or government approval. Maybe you need all of these things to really take on the bureaucratic state, these people that are in power longer than politicians, and all of the payments and all of the workers that are being paid here that maybe are not optimized, right? Maybe you need to take that fast action approach where maybe you're doing things fast and dirty, but you can clean it up afterwards. I'd buy that. I would buy that argument. But we live in this social media, quick news cycle, the headline is the story, no nuance type of world. That's where we're living. So you can be in favor of the reduction of government spending, but if you tell me that you think it's a good idea to have the richest guy in the history of the planet Earth as the face of cutting government spending, I don't know. I don't buy that. I don't think that's the way that you're going to go about it in the way and have any kind of support for that long term. I think that reducing government spending is a very, very good thing to do. And it's frustrating to see the optics that are being sort of applied to that idea and that principle right now, the way things are going down. Because it undermines credibility for the, I think, very right direction of reducing government spending so that we don't have to, A, tax citizens as much, and B, print money when we go into massive debt. in the cases where we do. Like usually we just issue bonds and people in the bond market will be able to absorb the amount of spending and debt we want to go into. That's not money printing. But in the extreme times like the pandemic or in the financial crisis, if you're looking at it in the States, and the quantitative easing programs, that is money printing. So there's a difference there that people don't often get. I'm in favor of that reduction of spending and the not printing money so that dollars lose value. I think that's super important to talk about. It's not talked about enough, frankly. It does a disservice to that idea when you see the optics of the richest billionaire in the world being the one who seems like he has total control over the U.S. apparatus. He's the one that has the power in this situation, or at least that's the way it's framed, right? Whether or not Trump has a handle on him or not. He's running around with this Argentinian chainsaw and slashing jokes on, we're slashing waste, haha. And he's like kind of speaking only in boomer type memes. Like it doesn't exactly give the best branding for what I think is a very good thing to do, is to remove waste and fraud and abuse from government systems, and not to mention just the ballooning contracts that are being given to a managerial class, a managerial elite that really seems to be the tail that is wagging the dog of most governments around the world when it comes to who's getting fat pay days out of it. But is having Elon at the head of this whole thing really even speaking to the base of voters that went with Trump, largely because of his economic policies, which admittedly now aren't being talked about in a consistent way? Like even if reshoring manufacturing from China via tariffs to revive this middle class is a good idea, you rarely hear that as the reasoning of the tariffs, or at least put succinctly like that. Instead, it's about fairness or fentanyl or a different thing on every single day. It's rough. So you have this mess with the US, and it limits domestically in Canada what the Conservatives can do and what positions they can take. Because I think largely before all of this, saying, hey, as the Conservatives, look at this chart of how much the government employees are being paid. Look at this chart of even given that government spending on employees, given that massive increase, well, there's more increase over here, even more, because we've got this massive ballooning of consultants and contractors that are being brought in to do the jobs of the people who are these newly hired government employees. Like, I think that pointing that out would be a good policy for the Conservatives. It would be a good policy for the Conservatives, but not in today's environment, given this branding, given this this questionable set of optics that we're getting out of the States. Because if the Conservatives start talking about all this government waste and abuse, well, then you risk having that Pierre Poilievre is Donald Trump messaging from the Liberals hit even harder, and have that sort of ruin your election chances, which it already seems like it's doing a good job of that. It is quite the pickle. It's quite the pickle to find yourself in if you're the Conservatives. Now, I want to make clear, I have just as many concerns about Carney as the next guy. This long financial resume, Goldman Sachs, and working at the central banks around the world, to a lot of people, that is incredibly, incredibly impressive and an indicator that this is the guy to take us through this uncertain time financially. This is the way that it's been talked about. To me, that glowing resume, those line items on it, to me, seem like more of a stain. Because when I see the decisions that have been made by the global financial elite, people like Carney, I find that these institutions, the International Monetary Fund, Bank of International Settlements, and the member banks, all the central banks around the world, consistently I've seen them make policies that are defendable. You could say this is what we're thinking and have it sort of seem like you're really working in the best interests of Canadians. But when you look at the results of some of these policies, largely I'm talking about the way that they handled the pandemic and the vast ballooning of assets for the benefits of corporations and the already wealthy at the cost for average people around the world. When I look at that, I start to think, it's not average people that are being served by these global institutions and these global financial elite. What it really is is the serving of corporations and the people who are in this class of elite, right? This class of people who have corporations and are not so tied to a people and a country, but more so are tied to this idea of global trade and the way that we can all become wealthier. The only problem is the wealth is growing, sure, but the location of that wealth in terms of how concentrated that is in a small group of people, that's a big problem. So this long glowing resume that Carney has, to me, is more of an indicator of, hey, you are part of this class of people that will have very good arguments for why you're doing what you're doing at the time. But then when you look at things in retrospect, it always seems to be the corporations that are doing well and the already wealthy that are doing well, while the average people tend to be getting worse and worse off. You look at that with a number of things in Canada, not just wages, but access to shelter and housing, the ballooning prices of real estate relative to wages. And then we can talk about for days about immigration policy and how that has impacted wages in the country, and how you can sort of use these moralized things of we need to be a place that everybody can come in the world. You can use these arguments to sound like a good guy when really it's just a matter of keeping costs down for big box stores. I'll go on a rant about that. I've got as much concerns about Carney as the next guy. This is what I'm trying to make clear. But conservatives, you gotta move on. You gotta move on, guys. It just seems desperate at this point. I wish things were back. Like, I wish we were still together. I wish we were still together, Trudeau. I wish we were back 6 months ago. Things were so good. We had a 40-point lead in the polls. I'm going to try to make things right. I'm going to try to bring us back to those good old days by just trying to swap one for the other, do the Indiana Jones swap, right? Put the bag, you take away the idol, put the bag on there, and hopefully nobody will notice. I don't think that the Carney equals Trudeau thing is going to land ultimately. It's like going back and visiting your teachers a couple years after you graduate from high school. You think it's going to make you look cool. You think it's going to be a good move. You think it's going to bring you back to when you were popular, but it just ends up looking sad. So I think that you got to move on. You got to find new points to hit on, focus hard on policies that you think are going to land with Canadians. And in the meantime, those policies could also subtly be sort of subtweets at Mark Carney in terms of reforms for the way that we handle our members of parliament in Canada. That's my take. But I think there's some fear from the Conservatives. I think that they're afraid of going as far as they should on some of these issues. I think that they're worried that, hey, if we actually buy into some of these things that we want to say, we're kind of scared that we're going to lose the centrist vote. We're going to lose votes that we've already gotten from people because maybe they'll think that we've gone too far. I want to play you a clip here. This is one of Trudeau's last messages, and it's an attack on Pierre Poilievre. And I think that this highlights how the Conservatives are not willing to go far enough right now to make the arguments that they need to politically to sort of reverse the tides of how things have been going lately, because nobody can argue it has not been going so hot for them. Listen to this.
There are foreign countries trying to interfere in our elections.
The public inquiry into
foreign interference
has just released its final report.
Our national security agencies have confirmed this. But for some reason, Pierre Poilievre refuses to listen to them.
Will you be joining NCCOP?
No.
There are foreign countries trying to interfere in our elections.
The public inquiry.
There's the clip. That was a little bit of a start of the repeat of it. Okay, so this story isn't new to you, likely. The foreign interference that nobody is denying is happening in Canada, happening at a large scale. And we just heard Trudeau's message about why will Poilievre not get his security clearance. You might have seen this online. This is a big attack against Poilievre, saying, what is he trying to hide? Now, there's a whole conversation to be had about the reporting that triggered all of this and how that was about Chinese interference in the Liberal primaries for riding in the selection of who would represent Don Valley North riding. This is where the story started, at least in the most recent uptick of this being a national story. Then, as this big national security committee for parliamentarians, the report that they came out, the NSICOP report, they call it, that it came out with way more details, and we covered this on the channel. By the way, subscribe to the channel and follow the podcast if you haven't already. We talk about all kinds of stuff. Not just podcast, but also short form episodes where we go really into depth on things. But we covered this. Shortly after this NSICOP report came out, Trudeau stood up and made claims about the Indian government killing a Khalistani leader on Canadian soil. Now, I'm not saying that didn't happen or it wasn't bad or anything, but the timing to stand up and publicly embarrass India, one of our most important trading partners, especially when it comes to imports. You can probably name that number one import. I think it's people. It was interesting timing that all of this went down, but I digress. Now, Poilievre responds to this criticism that, hey, why aren't you getting a security clearance so you can know about the interference that's going on in Canada? He says, well, I don't want to be muzzled. I don't want to not be able to talk about this as much as I want to with the people of Canada, because if I get the security clearance, well, then maybe I won't be able to say all the things that I want to say. At the same time, he won't have all of the information. This is what his critics will say. But what are you thinking, though? I don't think that people have the time to look into the nuances of what kind of power getting a assortment of different security clearances will give to the national security agencies, and how that could limit what you have to say. There's all different levels of security. I don't know which one, and how can anyone be expected to know which one allows you to say what in which context? There's not even many legal experts, I think, that would be able to tell you with any kind of certainty the details of what you can and what you can't say, and how that could all play out in a political race. People don't have the time to do that when they're going to their job and coming back. But I think that there are simpler things that could be said here that would get the point across. I think maybe he's not going far enough. Again, for fear of this Trump comparison or of going too far and losing the centrist vote. But what about that? Think of this hypothetical in your head. What if Poilievre came out and said, hey guys, I have reason to believe that there is some level of corruption and foreign influence even in our intelligence agencies. We already know it's widespread in Canada, impacting media executives. This was in the NSICOP report. Well, we already know this. We already know there's parliamentarians that are involved. But I believe that there is imagine Poilievre saying this. I believe that there is foreign influence in our intelligence agencies, maybe in our police agencies, RCMP. Now, if I were to get my security clearance as Poilievre and the legal obligations that come with it, well, that is one of the ways that these agencies can exert control over our political system. Imagine Poilievre came out and said that. We can't fully trust our institutions in Canada. Now, is that true? Who knows? Who knows if that's true? Everything in national security is this walled off thing that nobody can really know for sure about, because anything that national security experts don't want the public to know, they can simply say, well, this is a national security concern. We can't have the public knowing. We can't tell this person that. It's a system under control by people, right? And if you think that is entirely harnessed for altruistic good things, and that it's entirely unavailable to foreign countries, foreign interests, or even criminal organizations from infiltrating, well, I think that you're being a little bit naive. So who knows if what that idea for Poilievre to say would be true if he were to say it. But just use that. Like, I mean, you can't know what's true and you can't know what's not. God knows that the Liberals have been using this kind of stuff. We'll say what we can say, but not say it all. And who knows if it's true. And there's no way we can get caught in a lie because, well, it's a national security interest, so we can kind of just say what we want. It's being used. Who knows what's true? Who knows what's not true? Everything's a reality TV show in this situation. Like, it's all about perception. It's all politicians just trying to make it past the next tribal council. Right? So to say that you're above saying things that aren't 100% true, or to say that you're above sort of shifting narratives in ways that are beneficial to you, I think is just a quick way to lose an election. I think if you're being a realist about things, you can try to play fair as much as you can, and maybe that sounds good in children's storybooks, but I don't think it's the way the world works. I just don't. So use that. So if you lie or you speculate, are you in this reality show of politics, are playing a dishonest game? Or are you adapting to the new era? There's a new strategy. Everything is narrative. People use social media bot farms to astroturf your views and make people think that those views are actually the common consensus because they're seeing it on Reddit or they're seeing it on X every single day, every single post. They're seeing things that can confirm beliefs and sort of slowly shifts their thinking towards that. This is the stuff that's being done. It's an arms race. If you don't do it, you're going to lose. As messed up as that is, I think that's the way things are going. So, lots going on, but I think you've got to move on from the same old strategies that worked for you in the past. The game changes so quickly, and you're going to have to outwit, outplay, and outlast. Otherwise, the Conservatives are going to have forfeited a historic comeback. The tribe will have spoken, and it will be time for them to go. That's what I think. Let me know what you think. Good night, everybody. Good night.